Okay.
Are they all working?
One, two.
I love that at the end. Filmed in Nottingham and Grimsby. There can't be many feature films that end with that, can there?
Nottingham on Sea, I think we ended up with. The cast are going to come down in a minute. Is that right,
Yeah,
Caroline?
absolutely great. Yeah, we've got lots of cast members here, so we're going to invite them onto the stage soon. But I'm just going to have a quick few words with you guys. Shane, you said this was one of your most personal films. It is just about your most autobiographical, is it?
Yeah, I mean, all the films so far have been either based on characters from Utopsita or, events from my past. I mean, Dead Man's Shoes was reasonably personal, but wasn't... Events changed quite a lot in that film, whereas I think the passage of time of, when I first became a skinhead and a lot of the events, being sent up the garden with girls... that kind of malarkey.
Going to a shoe shop.
Yeah, it was even more X-rated than that, actually, with Michelle Newbold. It is, yeah, and it was one of these kind of times that was like I'd not really paid any attention to it. It's funny because I went back to Romeo Brass when Fraser had his bad back and everything, but it was actually after that, and it was only when I saw Dead Man's Shoes, the documentary, in Shane's shoes, when I saw myself talking about the night that this skinhead beat up this guy to kind of impress me, and then kind of realised that I was not going to be what I thought I wanted to be, which at the time wasn't a good thing, really. I wanted to be, I wanted to be as hard as him, as violent as him. I wanted to be a criminal, whatever. I was like the things that I thought I was capable of being. I realised when I saw that it wasn't in me.
Yeah. You come up with the storyline, but you don't write the script. Is that right? Do you write an entire screenplay, or do you improvise?
What's
the process?
He never writes a script. It's a nightmare. No, I mean on this it was really weird because I'd just gone on. We developed two ideas with EM Media who were here, and it was that thing that we developed two things after Dead Man's Shoes that hadn't quite worked out. And I'd gone on paternity leave 2 weeks. I turned my phone off, to my mobile, everything was off. And on the Friday, Shane rang me and went, "I've got it." And he said it in about one paragraph, and it was like, that's the one. So it was really good when you've got something that people are going to take to.
Yeah. But quite risky, creating something which is based on finding, the perfect boy to carry this feature film.
Yeah, it's a funny one, that, because we actually had someone else lined up before we got Tomo, and it was very much like myself. He kind of, everything about him was what you sort of want as it's like a heart and head scenario. The heart's telling you that this is the right kid, but your head's going, he's not even in school, he's not even doing 2 hours a day at school at the moment, so 12 hours a day on set in every single scene in the film is going to take some pulling off. But I kind of said to Mark, I said I'd rather do a week with the right kid than 6 with the wrong. And because after I'd sort of made Midlands and I wasn't happy because I'd made sacrifices, I just sort of said I'd rather not make one and put it in the hands of whoever sort of brought him here for me, And it, after the first week it was hard because he actually thought about quitting, and he started off because he's actually quite a cool little kid, and he's a Man United fan. He's always wearing Man United tops, and so we whacked him in these flares and made him grow his hair. And because the film attracts attention, there was a lot of girls hanging around the set, and they thought he was a real moron, And so he really hated it, didn't he, the first week?
There was one that time when he thought he was going to quit, and Shane was like, I'll handle this. It's going to be fine. We'll pretend there's somebody out around the back of the dining bus that's going to come and take his place. And I'm like, we'd not even closed the film. Everyone had the haircut, and we'd still not got all the money in. And he sat there with him, said, you can go, but I think you said to him that I had one chance, and you've got this one chance. And he kind of went, as soon as he thought there was another kid ready to take his place, it was like, oh no, actually I'm going to come and do this.
Yeah.
And he changed everything then, and it was.
Yeah. And then he got his hair sort of shaved, because I said to him, obviously when you get your hair cut and you get the docks on and you're hanging around with the gang, it'll be a completely different experience, because I shot the film chronologically. Obviously because of the hair you kind of had to. Not used a wig since small time, so that was, basically so he spent the first week on his own, basically, and was like wandering around docks, and he was bored out of his brains, you know. I mean, from our point of view, for me, they're the most beautiful shots in the film when he's walking around the docks on his own. And he was just like, this is boring, you know. So, you know, it wasn't until he got in the gang that he really sort of flourished and started to take it on board. And then we changed this. It was a bit of a Gillian McKeith scenario because I was watching his diet and I'd been looking at my own internal eating habits, and I got into these goji berries and whatever. I couldn't quite push them on him, but I did manage to get him off Coca-Cola and chips, and we got him on Purdy's vitamin drinks.
We had about 8 colas, do you remember? We kept going, we found this one from this Cornwall cola, and you go, just like that.
Yeah, he was. and he changed his diet, because this kid had been getting up at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. His whole body clock was like he, you know, lived in Australia or something, and we had to turn all that back round, changed his food, and it was mad, yeah.
So really the opposite of a stage school kid. Really.
The complete opposite, yeah. And after that first week as well, his mum came down to live with him, basically, because he'd got a, what do you call him, Mark, a chaperone.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, your mum should come down and give him something like, you know, some kind of normality. And it obviously, because his mum passed away not long after the film was completed, the film was finished shooting a couple of months after, that turned out to be the biggest blessing ever, because they got this time together when she was able to live in this lovely flat that Mark got them, and you know, they had sort of the best time they'd probably had together for a while, so that was worth its weight in gold.
Oh, that's brilliant. Now, I think, Shane, I always call you like the auteur of the East Midlands, because I think there is something, you know, you make films in and around Nottingham in a way that the French are, you know, very regional. I think you do the same. It's very respected in France, and in a way you are as well, Mark. You know, you're based in the north. Is it hard having a media career outside London? Is it hard to make films up here?
I think I mean, speaking differently, I used to be a location manager, so I used to do all the tough jobs, go on that estate where nobody else will go, because, you know, and I used to do that, and there was a time when it was booming. But I mean, I said this before, and I know that a lot of financiers of them are here tonight, but what's been great is it's giving that seed money to people to try and carve out a voice or a career. And I think places like Intermedia with Shane, and places where I grew up with SIF, Shepherd Independent Film, if it wasn't places like that, I'd have gone to London. I don't know about Shane himself, but I mean, it's really important. But what's great now is that there is, with the internet and things, I think you can actually, you know, there's the talent here, has always been here, but actually we can actually get things going here. You know, and like I said, on this one, even after Dead Man's Shoes, it was just so refreshing to look at normally you have to, in funding terms, you have to go, okay, we have to get so many jobs in the region. And it's, you know, people always say how hard it is. And it was like, with us, it was like, are there any not in the region? You know, it was a really good sort of thing to have. And I think coming from the north and trying to do it and have a family up in the north, and Shane, you know, being in the Midlands, you know, I think when you stick together, and I think that's the thing, that's the answer probably, like, I'm in Sheffield, Shane's in Nottingham, you know, sticking together, it's been really, you know, solid, and other people in Manchester and Newcastle and Liverpool, and, you know, and I think that's the thing, you know, together you can fight them.
Down south, This is your first period film, Shane. This is the first one you've set.
It is,
distinctly in the past. Now, what challenges did that present?
I suppose the main one from my point of view is I kind of thought there's loads of places that are still, you know, feel 80s, or, you know, but when we actually looked at it in closer inspection, the poorer areas, and, you know, if you like, the council roads and things like that, are the ones that have changed the most dramatically. Because the councils are obviously, council houses now are a thing of the past anyway, so they've been modernised and satellite dishes up and double glazing plastic PVC, and, you know, after a couple of 3 sort of scouts about, we actually realised that it didn't exist really anywhere, and it was probably would have been easier to have made a Victorian melodrama than actually trying to do something in the 80s, which didn't seem that far away. And it turned out that St Anne's, I mean, we were looking in Grimsby and kind of all over the place, and Richard, who was the location manager, just found this area in St Anne's, and one of the problems was obviously clearing cars and things like that, because it was a low budget for what we were trying to achieve, and Richard found that this part of St Anne's where it's all linked up mainly by paths and walkways, so there wasn't going to be that problem like round Combo's flat. They walked down to it, so that it was actually quite barren anyway of cars and things. And it was also this place where it still seemed to have all of its wooden windows and actually looked and reminded me a lot of like a Lane's Place in Uttoxeter, which had been knocked down now. That side of it was difficult. And then we got this quote for 80s cars, which if we'd gone to do it 10 years ago, you know, it wouldn't have been a problem, but it was like, we were getting quoted like 250, 300 quid a day for cars, and we needed them for 6 weeks, and we needed a lot of them to dress street. And we did it at first. It was a good idea. We basically went on eBay, and myself and Mark bought a car each and thought, well, we'll at least have a couple. And then, because it was such a stressful time, we started building this massive fleet of 80s vehicles. I started off with a Morris Marina, and I was driving to Wales and catching trains all over the country. And I should have been obviously planning the film, and I just got hooked on this. And Mark had a
that Lancia. My wife was going mad because I'd already got a Volkswagen camper van anyway, which she'd hated, and wanted a new one. And I bought this Lancia for 800 quid off eBay from Warrington. And it was just ridiculous because you get a brake. It looked cool, but it was a red convertible. I put it out, and this bloke came and offered me 6 cars for the Lancia. Yeah. And there was like 6 period cars, so I suddenly went, I've got rid of that red car you hate, love, but I've got 6, you know. No garage. And it was quite... But we knew we could make the film.
Yeah.
With the 12 cars and bit of Snenton and...
Yeah, and we had a guy on that... Mark got this guy on that was buying and selling the cars on eBay. He set up his own account and was just literally, after a week of a car being in the street, it'd be sold on eBay and he'd go and buy a Vauxhall Chevette or something like that. So they were changing basically all the time. And instead of it costing us like 111 grand, which was the quote for the job, it ended up costing us about 900 quid.
Have you still got any?
There's some people, some of the crew bought them, didn't they?
I sold the second AD's got the old Triumph Acclaim that you bought off that vicar.
Yeah.
20,000.
It had the vicar's name on it on the logbook. I was such a big selling point when I sold it to Mark. Reverend something, wasn't it, Mark?
Yeah. Not on the windscreen.
That was a good car, that.
Yeah, it's a good car.
Should have kept that.
Shall we take some questions from the audience?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we invite the cast down as
Yeah,
well and get the guys down?
Ask the cast. Please, can the cast come down? We can introduce you.
Yeah, on you come. Sporting
Yeah.
black bikini. So it's Andrew Shin, Vicky McClure, Rosamund Hampton, Chanel Cresswell and Kieran Hardcastle. Yeah. So we've got Milky, Lol, Smell, Kelly and Kez.
Well, I've got Andrew next to me, actually. Got to tell me about Al Jazeera. Apparently, they're a big fan of the film.
Mm. Yeah, massive fan. I had to do the screening today for Al Jazeera Network. And I heard Al Jazeera, I thought Al Qaeda Network. They specifically asked for me and Stephen, who played Combo, and Stephen phoned me and was like, fucking hell, I'm really fucking shitting it, Shimmy. He was like, aren't you worried? I said, I'm fucking fine, my character is, you're fucked. I was like, they're going to be fucking signing me up. Fucking, what did you say my name was going to be?
What? Which one? Oh, no, don't go there. It was based on the joke about Cat Stevens having a former name. I told Jimmy to go with one of these, go with a Muslim name, but then we realised it was a television company. And
yeah, it was actually a reputable company. The impression had treated us really well. It's actually the best. I've actually been treated on this whole shoot.
Yeah, that's almost racist.
Okay, moving swiftly on. We have a microphone up there. Any questions, please? The gentleman in the grey T-shirt.
I'm pretty much your age, right? And I'm from Manchester.
Yeah.
So my thought is, post-war, pretty much every youth culture has been based on blackness, from rock and roll, soul in the 60s, the punks were into, reggae, round about the ska time, Northern Soul was very big. Why is it, do you think, that it was, the ska subculture attracted racists or attracted the National Front?
I mean, I don't think it was the scar. I think.
Oh yeah, but the skinhead subculture.
Yeah, the skinheads. Yeah, I mean,
why was it that was so attractive to the National Front at the time? Why was it seen to be so English? I'm sorry, this is about your personal experience rather than actually about the film, but it's one thing that's always, because I'm a big Scar fan, I've always been curious about it.
Well, see, when I became a skinhead, I was lucky that my sister's boyfriend was actually massively into the original, first wave skinhead music, the Trojan reggae, and played me Samara and the Upsetters and Desmond Dekker Toots, and he was kind of saying, if you want to listen to Oi music, you've also got to know where all this came from. And obviously there was the sort of the second wave, like the Specials and Selector, and those bands were around. But from my point of view, it was kind of like I was listening to Oi and I was listening to Trojan reggae. But that wasn't everybody, I don't think. I think some people came into it, and this is where this misconception, I think there's actually skinheads out there who don't even know. Because I went on a radio show and they said that I had skinheads who said they've been skinheads 20-something years and that I was lying, that it wasn't born out of basically the working class white kids listening to the Jamaican music in the late 60s. So from my point of view, I was kind of, to answer your question about the National Front, I think if you've got 3.5 million people who are unemployed, and the skinheads that I was hanging around with, they were bright, leery people, and their kind of attitude was, well, if I'm being told I'm going to be a road sweeper, I'm going to do a YTS or whatever, I'm going to cause you so much trouble, and I'm going to be a pain in your arse, and you're going to notice me, and I suppose if you take that sort of recipe, and you take these, and a lot, it wasn't all skinheads weren't all into the reggae. At that time there was this crossover, and Oi music is wrongly remembered, I think, now for being racist music, and no Oi music was racist. There was left wing and right wing, and it was. But the problem.
It's peculiar to me that the National Front seemed so attracted to.
Well, they look like soldiers. I mean, at the end of the day, skinheads can look aggressive, and can, at the end of the day, it's no surprise to me if you see people walking down with boots, and especially in the 80s when the jeans went higher and the docks got taller, the bleach went on them, and, they look more aggressive. And I think if you're in a political, especially in places like Uttoxeter, I remember Ilkeston, and the National Front seemed to do well in places where there was very little ethnic minorities. It wasn't like it is now with the BNP, where they actually target areas where there's a massive mix. Back then, they'd go to places where how do you know what the truth is if you don't live with a big Asian community or a big black community? So, we shouldn't roll on forever, because obviously give other people to
debate.
Can we have the lady in black,
Jeremy Kyle.
please? Shane, would you? I've heard somewhere that you said you weren't a political filmmaker, but do you think as you're getting older, you are embracing political issues more as you mature? And
I think this is probably, I'm not a political, like with 24/7, and films like that, I think my characters are always a result, because I didn't understand, as a kid and as a teenager, if I didn't have any money to buy anything because I was on the dole, I'd pinch it. So I found my own way around. I didn't blame Margaret Thatcher or anybody. I just went and took something for myself because I was starving. Got caught pinching, obviously, famously, set of darts, egg custard, some damsons, a shell suit. So that obviously, from my own point of view, and the people in Uttoxeter that I grew up around, they were really, ingenious. And if there wasn't enough around, we didn't all sit around. It wasn't one of them towns where people sat around moaning about what was being handed down to this council and why we weren't getting what we were getting. Yeah. People just went, well, if there ain't enough, I'll just, either take something. Yeah.
In a way,
and they were my sort of fondest memories, to be honest, because everyone was kind of, that's when you see, that whole thing about the, the ingenious nature of people.
Yeah.
And so that's why I suppose with This Is England, when I look back at the footage of the Falklands War, and I actually, as an adult, saw those little Argentinian kids, and I found out a bit more about their history, I realised I was quite ashamed, actually, because I remember being a kid thinking we were like going on a World Cup campaign, and sort of it was all splashed over the paper, take down the Argies, and then when you actually see what we're fighting against, it was the equivalent of, like a sort of the Terminator fighting you know, some kids in a playground. It was, you know, basically it was just 15, 16, 17-year-old kids who'd never held a gun before. So that was probably why this film was more affected by that and a bit more apparent.
If you're interested in that issue, we're showing a film called Blessed by Fire in June, which is the first Argentinian film about the Falklands, exactly about that. Okay,
I'll be there.
Lady in Black. Sorry to take so long.
Hi. Just a question. British films are often criticised for failing to gain a wide audience, but This Is England has already achieved an incredibly high profile. How have you gone about doing that?
I don't actually think we've not really had the budget to, or the distributors have not really had the budget to do that, because you just get, Spider-Man 3 is out next week, which costs more than their marketing campaign is more than our budget for the film. So I think what's amazed me about this, because we finished it, went to Toronto, went to Rome, went to the Biffers, went to London, and this was all the end of last year, is it's got word of mouth. And it really has proved to me that it does work. I was quite sceptical about it. And what's amazed me about this is that it's not just kind of got debates about the film, like film reviews or film critique, but there's like articles about fashion and music. And so I think it's just hit a nerve, whether it's, you know, and there's nothing deliberate about the timing of it in terms of the Falklands. It's 25 years from the Falklands, 30-year anniversary of Trojan Music, you know, a part of Trojan Music. And it's kind of, all these things are accidental. And I just think, you know, we're very lucky that it's hit a thing. And I think central to it is that Shane, you know, as a filmmaker, is probably, you know, after Dead Man's Shoes, you know, I think people were anticipating that went wider on DVD, so it's hit that. So there's a lot of people that are waiting for this film that might not have, you know, in terms of it's not an art house film, you know, and the problem is with British film, people say it's art house, that it's not. And I just think that at the moment with this, there seems to be more people talking about it than we need to. So it's quite, I can't wait to get back to my kids tomorrow and just sort of shut the curtains, and, you know, because it's been phenomenal, and it may never happen again, but I think it's just hit a nerve this year, this time. And at the end of the day, you know, Tomo and what Shane have done have just, and the rest of the cast are incredible. So I think at the end of the day, good work comes out.
Yeah, but and it's not just in this country, it's hit a nerve. I mean, it's won awards around the world, and particularly like a Young People's Award in Rome. That obviously it's really struck a chord with young people. Can I just raise the issue of certification? There have been, you know, issues around it. Do you want to say anything about that?
Well, I think the Rome Award sort of says it all, really, that the jury in Rome were kids from sort of 14 to 17 or something, and they actually watched the film, because at film festivals, obviously, it doesn't come under the restrictions of the BBFC or their own local bodies. And we won a prize, and the people, because obviously it's an 18, and we wanted it to be a 15. It's harsh, but my belief as a filmmaker is that any copycat crimes that I've ever heard about have come off the back of films that have been basically not connected to the reality of what's going on. So like in Natural Born Killers, you're just going around macheting, chopping, axing, setting fire to, and we're all sat there kind of, you know, it just passes you by, but you've just watched 100 murders. Whereas in this film, nobody dies. There's one beating at the end of it, and I make people care about it. So I sort of like, the fact that I got an 18 is almost the ultimate compliment in a way. But at the same time, the only downside to it is that they can't, a lot of people, you know, young-looking 15-year-olds won't be able to get in and see it, but, you know, they're watching it on pirate.
But just a sec, because you can't see it legally, can you? Legally? Can you? I know Kez can. Can you now, Ros? No, not quite?
Depends where I am.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, there you go. Most of the people speaking.
Yeah, and like the sad thing was some councils have overturned it, but then our own local council, very much like my review in the Evening Post today, there's not a lot of support around these parts in certain areas, and the fact that the Central Workshop provided all that talent, and most of them were around that 15 border, and, you know, how they can put, you know, snakes on a plane with all these slayings in it. I can't relate to that personally, because I think if you're putting somebody off violence, you're doing a good job. That scene in that flat's not going to make one person want to go out and smack someone. You know, it's not like Rocky where you jog up the street afterwards, is it? You know, let's be honest.
Any more questions? The gentleman in, is it a pink shirt? I don't know, yeah.
Salmon.
Salmon, striped
I've got a salmon shirt.
You know, the scene, the film set in the 80s.
Yeah.
Where we are now, do you think we're there now? Is that anything to do with the release it now? I mean, with the music that's out at the minute, the thing that's going on in Iraq.
I mean, from my point of view, other people can say their piece. There's parallels in terms of obviously that sort of nature of, if you like, political wars rather than wars you can't avoid. I think Iraq started to stink of that a little bit. The reason that I didn't make the film for anything as clever as that, really. For me, the skinhead movement has been airbrushed from history, apart from films like Romper Stomper, American History X, and obviously even something like Made in Britain that's only shown one side of it. And I wanted to be able to say to people I was a skinhead, and I was proud of being a skinhead. I didn't want to, if I said to someone I was a skinhead, they just think you were a racist. And I didn't want that, because it isn't the truth, you know. And then with some of the time, like Sean has in the film with the summer, you know, when you sort of get that feeling of being in a gang for the first time, you know, it's almost like people remember the 80s, the romantics, the rockers, the goths, the kids with the dealy boppers and the Rubik's Cubes, but it's almost like blotted out. And so that was my main thing, was almost like, you know, if someone had made a film about that, I might not have done it, but it just seemed like there was this gaping hole. And the 80s was the period where it was in the balance, you know, you'd sort of like, people still were looking back to the 60s, but also the National Front was sort of moving in on it, and it sort of, you know, changed. And a lot of the skinheads I knew became scooter boys, and they went into that side of it, you know.
Looking at the film, like the kids walking down the street, it could be today. The haircuts, you know, the clothes they're wearing. Sometimes in the film, I find myself not even thinking that it was the 80s. You know what I mean?
Was dressed very strange.
We've got a question at the front here. John, if you could, I don't know how quick it's going to be.
Here we go, John.
Can you tell us about how Tomo bartered for the cost of his audition, and do any of the other cast, did any of them make similar demands?
Since or after? Before, sorry. Well, Wagamamas, yeah, pizza, yeah.
I mean,
big hotel bill from Shimmy and Vicky, by the way, the other night that they left with me. £145, thank you.
The porn wasn't ours. We were in room 9.
Tomo did it, honestly. Tomo did it up front. He asked for a fiver before he went to an audition.
Yeah, he did.
Or a PlayStation game. But,
yeah, I mean, Tomo was incredible, because he wasn't doing it out of spite. If I'm honest, he was doing it because he didn't think he was going to get the part, and he was like, you know, the equivalent of a street marine. You know, these kids, like, you know, it's like, this guy obviously wants me to come to this thing, and blah blah blah. And he's thinking there's obviously he's just been turned down for a part in a school play where he's meant to stand as a tree and wave, and he couldn't get that. So not getting that part, I don't think he thought his chances were great of. And he'd seen Dead Man's Shoes on Pirate as well and that, so I think he put this big gaping hole between us and didn't think he was going to get it, whereas I met him, when I met him in person, I knew he was the person for the job, but I also knew if he was anything like me, if I gave it him too quickly, he'd give up. So I had to pretend he wasn't sort of getting it, and this game happened where it was like a £5 and then a £10, then 20, then it had to be the newest PlayStation game, and then he wanted a mobile phone. This was each time, not all in one day, like. And so each time he'd come down, the thing got bigger, and in the end I said, look, you're going to have enough money to buy yourself all of this if you get the part. And I mean, the rest of the guys who were in the rehearsals, I mean, they basically worked with him for a lot longer. They all kind of knew, I think, that, you know, obviously he was going to get the part, but we all had to kind of pretend to him that he wasn't, so that he'd stick at it. So, you know, he was a little hustler, but once he actually knew he'd got the part and he had, like, money on the hip, he was fine, unlike Shimmy.
I want to ask you guys, because whenever we do, whenever we have Shane, or whenever we do, you know, a new film, there's always a party atmosphere, I think, at Broadway. You just bring it with you. Is there a sort of party atmosphere on set when you're working, or do you get serious?
Oh no, it's fun. I mean, we all had, like, when we was rehearsing, obviously, we all, like, form the group. It's quite similar to how we are in the film, actually. But no, we just had loads of fun. Yeah, we did. It's true.
Yeah, we had a laugh. We had a great laugh. It was great. No, we did.
You got.
It was serious at times. It did get really serious. I'm not being funny, but it was serious. Stephen Graham, when he came on set, you weren't sure whether you were going to get Combo or Steve. And like, he bought me pickled onion monster munches that turned my tongue blue, and I wasn't sure what I just went with it.
I just went with it.
You just went.
I think the bar beckons.
It does beckon.
Yeah.
But I think we've got time for one more question.
Yeah.
Yes.
I particularly love the humour in the film. I'm just wondering how difficult it was for the lovely actress there, the colourful outfit, to do the love scene. Especially with the black lipstick.
I don't know, really. At the end of the day, when you're growing up, lots of bizarre things happen. You're in lots of strange places and you're doing lots of strange things. And it's life, and we were little and large, and Smell really loved Sean. So it wasn't hard for me, and it was sincere in her character.
Say the line for us.
Do you want to suck my tit?
That's the end.
We should finish there, that's it.
That's it.
Well, how can we follow that?
Impossible.
We can't. On that note, thank you for coming, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.